Peace be upon you, Ghamidi Sahib.
Peace be upon you as well.
Ghamidi Sahib, how are you doing?
I am quite well by your prayers. Are you well?
Yes, Ghamidi Sahib. All praise be to God. May God grant you a life of health and well-being. Your presence is a blessing for us students. We strive to learn a lot from you. We read your works, listen to you, and benefit from your wisdom.
This is your kindness. I am but a student. As a student, I present my thoughts whenever I get the opportunity.
No, this is your humility. Truth be told, it is God's grace that in our present world, among the great thinkers, scholars, and theologians, He has granted you a unique position and ability. Not only have you written a commentary on the Quran and clarified the principles of faith, but you have also addressed every objection that has come your way, and you have responded to them all in both your writing and speech. I have not seen anyone else do this in the same way.
This is your affection towards me.
So I have observed some modern thinkers in the Arab world who interpret religion in new ways and do not hesitate to chart newer paths from their traditional schools of thought. I have even sought to speak with a few of them, such as Ahmed al-Kubanji in Iraq, who holds very different views and has written several books. This is why I say that in both the Arab and Urdu-speaking worlds, I do not know of anyone like you. May God grant you lot of reward for your effort, and may your shadow of knowledge and compassion remain over us students.
We must pray to God for steadfast faith. Now I am at this stage of life where the greatest desire is to maintain faith and good deeds as we stand before our Lord.
Absolutely, Amen. Okay, Ghamidi Sahab, I had initiated a series of discussions with some scholars intending to compile these interviews into a book. In this, I engaged with secular, liberal, and even atheist perspectives, as well as those who interpret Islam in diverse ways from within the tradition. I had a strong desire to be able to sit with you for some time and ask questions that we students have, and it seems God has afforded me this opportunity. I would like to present some questions to you as a student. I have divided them into foundational questions about religion, philosophy, and science, which I believe are essential for students to consider. In my opinion, others may disagree. Additionally, I have a few questions about your own thought. Although with God's grace, there is no aspect of your work that has not been critiqued and responded to, still the journey of knowledge continues. As a student, I feel there are some points that perhaps have not been clarified in the way I see. Hamdi Sahib, my first question is, when we examine the history of religion and the history of secular thought, particularly when we foreground Western philosophy, we see that they categorize the development of human civilization into stages. The first is the mythological age, then comes the age of reason and philosophy, and then comes the stage or the age of science. Now, some Western thinkers put religion also in the stage of mythology. So as a student, I seek to understand how you, as a religious scholar and someone educated in philosophy, how do you define and distinguish between mythology, religion, philosophy, and science?
You have summarized an account of the history of the world. Whenever such a history is presented, part of it will be based on what is well known and established, that which is accessible to us. When this phase will be discussed, it can be supported or refuted with evidence. However, beyond this, there is a realm of speculation. For instance, consider the history of humanity. When does it begin? While it used to be believed that humanity emerged some 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, now, on the basis of science, we are now pushing this timeline back to millions of years. The history of man's consciousness is also some thousands of years old. Still, when it is said that our origin occurred from this point, then what is the basis for it? Our known history does not extend beyond 5,000 to 6,000 years. How can we make definitive claims about the origins of civilization based on such limited evidence? In my view, humanity lacks the means to definitively narrate this history. The history of human creation and the history of human thought should be one and the same. If they are, and if we have access to both, then we can make claims based on evidence. Otherwise, it is merely an expression of someone's speculation or at best, an educated guess. This is why, in my view, the history presented by the Quran is more reliable. The Quran states that humanity originated from a being whom God appointed as a prophet. The guidance given to him is the same guidance that has reached us through the final prophet. This guidance came from God. Its message has always been one and the same. The Quran expresses this in words. Mankind was one community. When humanity began, their religion, their viewpoint was the same. Differences arose later. How these differences emerge, we are aware of that. That's because we have witnessed how these differences emerge within known history. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, emerged on earth within the light of history, and the most authentic expression of the religion he presented is the Quran, which we have with us today. What kinds of differences have emerged and what sects and groups have formed over these 15 centuries? We are aware of them. Similarly, we can assume that differences must also have arisen in earlier times as well. God has informed us that when differences emerged, then mythological narratives of polytheism also came into existence. Angels were deified and worshipped, and similar ideas about the jinn were adopted. People also began to speculate about natural phenomena. And eventually, to rectify these deviations, God initiated the chain of prophets. The Quran says, He sent down prophets, givers of glad tidings and warners. They warned people about the hereafter and alerted them to their errors. Along with them, He revealed the book to adjudicate between people regarding their differences. This is the history presented in the Quran, the Book of God. If there is any history to compare with this, I will consider it. But if it is based on conjectures, mental constructs, or an historical narrative based on any individuals, whether named or unnamed is being repeated, it holds no weight for me. The history of human creation, as science describes it, and the history of human intellectual evolution should begin simultaneously. If both are known simultaneously, then they are acceptable. If not, how can I accept that a creature supposedly born 30,000 or 100,000 years ago began its civilization from myths which are 5,000 years old? The Quran's narrative is far more credible in this regard. These differences arose much later in time. What the reasons for the creation of such differences were, I am aware of them. When God's prophets explained that besides humans, angels and jinns are also creations and both are intangible, immaterial beings, then some speculations naturally emerged as a result of these. For instance, in Arabia, polytheism took the form of deifying angels as daughters of God and associating jinn as partners with God. This is easily understandable in light of recent history, particularly the last 2,000 years, which is largely known to us. So the question is, how can I accept the origin of humanity based on mythology? What evidence is there for it?
Ghamidi Sahab, thank you very much. But sir, this argument holds only if one has faith in the divine text and the Quran. Since you believe in it and are its interpreter, you present this perspective. But how would you convince someone who does not accept Islam as a religion, denies divine revelation, or is even an atheist? How would we explain it to them? They rely on sociology, history, archaeology, and even linguistics to gather evidence supporting their views. They present that kind of evidence. Then how would you present this to such a person without relying on revelation or the concept of a divine book?
I would first ask them about the evidence they present. Where does this evidence come from? I need to be convinced about the validity of this evidence. If there is a historical account in God's book that I know of, and a conflicting account arises, I will consider it. But how is that account established? For example, if someone claims that humanity emerged 10,000 or 15,000 years ago, what is the basis for this claim? If the known history does not provide a basis for such definitive statements, then it is merely speculation. I can spin a tale from a shard of pottery, but can it be considered factual? For something to be considered factual, it must be based on evidence. If the biological history of humanity and its intellectual history begin simultaneously and there is concrete evidence for this, I will find it quite worthy of consideration. But if this isn't the case, then I will invite everyone to consider the history presented by the prophets. The first question about the history offered by the prophets is whether we can trust their account. The arguments for this are entirely separate. When I find those arguments convincing, I will give weight to their account. If not, I must acknowledge that there are two histories, one that is presented by the prophets and another which is constructed through human speculation. Why should the speculative history be preferred? First, this must be clarified. Unless this is clarified, I do not consider it worthy of attention. When something isn't worthy of consideration, why must one refute it?
Okay, Ghamidi Sahab. It is said that the earliest philosopher in history is an individual by the name Thales of Miletus, followed by others like Anaximander, and that human thought began in Greece or India. So it is argued that before the Greeks, all explanations of the universe were based on mythology, and their mythology is well documented. Similarly, India and Egypt have their mythologies. They argue that polytheism existed before, and humans had imagined that multiple forces or beings governed the universe, and they are engaged in conflicts and marriages. Then came Thales, who said everything originates from water. They claim this is the strongest evidence, as there is no proof outside religious texts like the Quran that monotheism was the starting point of humanity or that Adam or Eve were the progenitors of humanity. So, my question is about this. Isn't this an argument you would take seriously?
The philosopher who you have named, what era did he belong to? Were they around 100,000 years ago?
No, certainly not.
How did humanity begin before them? If Greece had these mythological concepts 5,000 years ago, and we can imagine India had similar ideas, but humanity's history began much earlier than them? I am reiterating. Tell me about the beginning of humanity's history. What evidence do you have? You are starting the history of humanity from 10,000 years ago. Let me tell you what differences emerged after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and after Jesus Christ. What kind of mythologies emerged? What concepts did Sufism present? What kind of things did Christian theology adopt? Why can't I then say that these are things that began to emerge after the era of the prophets? And then, when God sent Prophet Abraham and chose two specific regions to establish prophethood there, a different history unfolded in those areas. In regions where this call was absent, philosophers and mystics emerged, and such people who speculated and narrated history based on their conjectures and also attempted to solve the problems of the universe. These two narratives run parallel until it is proven which one came first. What is the basis of this entire discussion? Should I start the history of humanity from 10,000 years ago?
No,
If you tell me that 5 or 6,000 years ago was the time of the Vedas, then what about before that? Where was humanity? Either tell me that science has proven that human creation also occurred some 6,000 years ago, only then will this claim hold weight. Otherwise, I have never felt the need to refute it. This is the history that will go back 2, 3, 4, or 5,000 years. From there, you will begin to speculate. Some things will become established knowledge for you, and on others, you may be able to comment on them if you just look at the history of the world. What forms has the religion given by the prophets taken? What differences have people created? What concepts have emerged? What sects have appeared? What kind of mystical formations have emerged with all their attendant stages and stations? We have seen all these things emerge in the world. Why shouldn't I accept that all this emerged much later? Start history from where you scientifically accept human creation. On one hand, you are relying on science, and on the other, you are going against the scientific method. You should synchronize both histories. Specifically state that after all biological discussions and discoveries, we have concluded that the history of the world begins 5,000 years ago, And this is essentially the history of human creation. Only then will this claim be worthy of consideration. There is a difference of thousands of years between the two histories. Therefore, whether you start from Greece, India, or Egypt, it will not go beyond 5 or 6,000 years. On what basis is this claim being made? First, explain this to me, and then I will consider it worthy of attention. I did not say that through research we have determined how things happened in the world, and that we can explain it through these evidences and traces. This is not our subject. Those who need to conduct this research should do so. After doing so, if the information they provide about world history and its intellectual history aligns with the history of human creation, then it will be worthy of consideration. I am saying that this is not worthy of consideration from the start. There is a severe fallacy in it. For example, humans have existed for 1 or 200,000 years, and on the other hand, you are saying that 3,000 years ago, this situation existed and human thought began from there. What is the connection between these two? Establish this connection for me, and then I will elaborate.
My next question was this. I was relating the beginning of the history of thought or intellect in this way, but the underlying concept is that in the Bible and similarly in the Quran, it is clearly visible. Your interpretation is slightly different from other commentators, and those who completely accept evolution are entirely different. So there, it seems as if God called a gathering of angels and said, I am going to create a human, a vicegerent. Then he collected clay, blew into it, and Adam came into existence. Then from his side, Eve was created from Adam himself. The Quran states this. Now, from Hadith's history and the Bible, it seems that she was created from his rib. All this seems entirely mythological. In contrast, we have the scientific theory of evolution, which states that over centuries, thousands or millions of years, humans evolved into their current form. When they gained consciousness and began to think, they observed their surroundings, clouds, sun rays, earthquakes, storms, and floods, and based on the principles of attraction and repulsion, they formed these concepts. This is how history began. The other is entirely mythological.
This is the second fallacy. Which of these narratives is there in the Quran? Currently, the most authoritative expression of religion is the Quran. It is the most authoritative source. Everything else will be viewed in its light. If the Quran states that human history began 7,000 or 10,000 years ago, or if it says that God blew his spirit into a form, then please point it out. The Quran in Surah As-Sajda tells a completely different story. It says that the creation of humans began from clay. The word teen, which means clay, is used, and the word lazib, sticky, is used. I have not given any new interpretation. Everyone knows its meaning. From there, creation began. Then it is stated that God placed the ability to reproduce within his creation. Look at the words of the Quran. He created man from clay, then made his progeny from a drop of despised fluid. In the second stage, God placed this ability within him. Then it says, then came the stage of fashioning him. And after that, he breathed into him of his spirit, in the process made him into a new creature. This is the Quran's narrative. What in this does science refute? This is the description of his material existence and how his true personality emerged. It emerged through the blowing of the spirit then, just as it does now in the mother's womb. Tell me what in this Quranic description is being refuted by science. As for taking a tradition from the Bible, a mythological narrative, and mixing them to create a concoction, the question is, was all this background present when the final book of God was revealed, which is the most authoritative source about which no one can even imagine that its language or words have been altered, which has been transmitted generation after generation among Muslims exactly as Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, presented it? That is the most authoritative expression of religion. Point out to me anything in it that expresses or supports this mythological concept, and then I will comment on it. In my view, facts must first be established. When I enter the realm of religion, the first issue will be authenticity. Without authenticity of text, religion cannot stand. Who is the one who presented it? If there is no authenticity, then it is philosophy, people's narratives, about which anyone can say anything. The issue of authenticity must first be resolved. In the world today, there is no other book like the Quran, about which everyone agrees that it is the book presented by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the book of God. Whether someone accepts it as the book of God is another matter, but historically, no other narrative can be presented as a challenge to it. It is in its original language, with its original words. Its language is a living language. Its narrative is what I have told you. So, tell me, where in this narrative is it stated that Eve was created from a rib, or that Adam was created 5 or 7,000 years ago? Is there any such thing even hinted at in the Quran? There is no such thing in my view. Things should be kept clear. As I said earlier, if you want to narrate the history of the world, it must align with the scientific history of human creation. Only then is it worthy of consideration. And if you want to discuss religion, the Quran is its most authoritative source. Base your discussion on it.
Now, Ghamidi Sahib, you are saying about the Quran, we see that we have two basic theories. One we call the theory of creation, and the other the theory of evolution. It seems to us, after hearing your understanding of the Quran, that you are influenced by the scientific understanding of human creation that emerged after science. The reason is that the 1400-year tradition of Quranic interpretation, including Shia, Sunni, and Zaidi schools, as well as theological and juristic commentaries, all of them did not approach it in the way that Sir Syed Alama Parvez and then you have in the 20th century. I have read your commentary as a student, especially the 6 or 7 places where the creation of Adam and related topics are mentioned. It seems you are influenced by science in your interpretation. For example, in Surah An-Nisa, it is clear when it says, we created man from a single nafs, and then we created its spouse from it. So it seems clear that Eve was created from Adam himself. And the hadith narrative also seems to be supporting this. Your interpretation seems influenced by science to us as students of your work.
If my interpretation were influenced by science, I would have written the entire scientific explanation beneath it. I have not done that. You can take out my commentary and see. What emerges from the words, I have only expressed that. In my view, the way to understand the Quran is to first take the word as it is, then accept the sentence structure as it is, and then place it in context to see if the word is not amenable to any specification, if it is not brought to express a specific meaning, or if it is not indicating any metaphor. This, in my view, is the correct method of interpretation. You can take the verse and criticize every point of my translation or the meaning I have expressed. And then you can tell me where I have inserted any scientific concept into the words. I have given a straightforward translation and expressed its inevitable results. If I were influenced by the theory of evolution, I would have explained the entire theory.
But Hamdi Sahab, the great commentators who came before us, did not explain it this way. They explained it as we have been hearing and reading since childhood. Does this mean that you are saying they did not remain within the text and went astray, which is why this idea emerged that Eve was created in this way, leading to the entire narrative of sibling marriages?
First, let me ask you, are you not aware of the method adopted in the commentaries written in our tradition? The Quran states something, but the commentator instead relates all the traditions, biblical narratives, and Israelite stories regarding it. This is the usual method. People have been writing commentaries in this way. God has preserved the Quran for this very reason. He has revealed it in its original language so that it never needs to rely on any of these things. In my view, the Arabic language is a living language. The scholarly method is not this. The scholarly method is what I have expressed, and you should read it again. There I have not expressed the scientific theory of evolution. What I have understood from the Quran, I have expressed that. It may be wrong, but to prove it wrong, you will have to show that have I given a word a meaning that cannot be derived from the spirit of the Arabic language, or that I have accepted a sentence structure that cannot be derived from the spirit of the Arabic language? If you point out such a thing, I will certainly elaborate. Otherwise, look at my entire thought. There are dozens of things in which I differ from the classical scholars and commentators. My esteemed teacher, Amin Islahi's commentary, Reflections on the Quran, is available. You can take a look at it. In it, you will find the same interpretation, and you know that he had absolutely no interest in such scientific matters. But when he understood this verse of the Quran, he understood it exactly as what I have stated. This is the method. In my view, the correct method should be to focus on the meaning, rather than looking at what was stated first and what came afterward. If the words of the earlier statement accept a particular interpretation, I am ready to bow my head before it, to accept it. But if the words do not accept the interpretation I have stated, then may God's and the angels' curse be upon me if I try to force such a meaning upon them.
No, dear sir, you never said anything like that. What you have done is very different from the approach of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan or Ghulam Ahmad Parvez, who made science their ultimate standard and interpreted the Quran accordingly, which then led to a rejection of miracles and even the theory of evolution itself. You have not done that, and I would never accuse you of it, because I have made an effort to read scholars like you. Regarding Surah Nuh, you have written here that based on the Quran, and our understanding, it appears that humans were created in a certain way from the earth itself. I am simply saying that it seems as if during the time you were writing your exegesis, the prevailing accepted truth among people was that humans were not created in the manner described in the Bible or in old Quranic commentaries and hadiths and traditions. The contemporary mind could no longer accept that. So it appears that your exegesis leans towards the theory of evolution. Am I correct in understanding this, Ghamdi Sahib?
No, that is not the case. The Quran's words are clear. People can interpret it as they see fit. But when I began studying the Quran, I did so with a commitment to understanding it based on three principles. This is the scholarly tradition of the Farahi school. We neither look to the right nor to the left. We focus on the words, sentence structure, and context. Of course, we can make mistakes in interpretation, and we are always open to criticism. But if someone thinks that my views are influenced by the West, or that I have been affected by some Orientalist while discussing a particular juristic issue, they will have to answer to God for such accusations. For me, the most fundamental question is, what does this Quranic verse mean in its own Arabic language context? You know that the training at the Farahi school is entirely based on this principle. I spent nearly a quarter of a century with my esteemed teacher and received this very training. Thus, the idea of being influenced by external sources does not exist in my thought. We have demonstrated, even in the interpretation of Khalaqa minha zawjaha, that the Quran itself provides similar examples elsewhere, showing that this phrase is used to mean creation from the same species. There are precedents of it elsewhere. In the Quran, when a word or phrase allows for two possible meanings, we look at other instances in the Quran to determine the correct interpretation. This is the principle on which we base our exegesis. You can see that even Ustad Imam followed the same method as did Imam Farahi before him. I have not simply devised this interpretation in modern times.
Thank you very much. May God reward you abundantly. All right, Ghamdi Sahib, I have one last question on this topic. We have two perspectives on the origins of humanity, one from science and one from the old interpretations of the Bible and the Quran. Could you clarify where you differ from both perspectives? How do you explain this entire picture, particularly the idea that there was no Adam and Eve as traditionally understood?
There is one thing I have made very clear. The Quran describes the origins of the human species. It does not state that humans evolved from another species. I have refuted that idea. This is the fundamental difference. However, the scientific principles that have been discovered, such as the law of natural selection, similarly selective breeding, and then also the influence of environmental factors on species, are, in my view, entirely correct. These are observable phenomena which we daily experience. All of this can be accepted. But has science discovered the mechanism by which one species transitions into another? That mechanism has not yet been found. If it is discovered, then it will present an alternative explanation, and I will reconsider whether I have misunderstood the Quran. But as of now, such a mechanism has not been demonstrated.
Thank you very much for answering my questions so well. As a student, it is difficult for me to pose questions to a scholar like you. I often feel nervous in such conversations.
I am just a student. Consider me a student like yourself.
Well, I have always admired your humility. From my childhood, whenever I have listened to you, I have seen this humility in you. Now, Hamdi Sahib, my next question is this. In today's world, many fundamental human questions relate to the universe, the afterlife, human nature, and society. Some people reject divine revelation and prophecy and instead choose to rely solely on reason and science to answer these questions. In your view, what are the distinct methods and domains of reason, science, and religion?
The method of reason is very clear. When we begin to reflect upon the world, the first thing we encounter is that everything consists of either matter or consciousness. We know that both matter and consciousness, when analyzed, reveal either substance or the manifestation of force. We also know that when force is manifested, we can explain it in three ways. First, through the relationship of cause and effect. Second, through the relationship of action and actor. And third, by attributing the qualities of action to the actor. From this, we derive necessary conclusions based on reason. When we introduce imagination into this process, a world of possibilities emerges, and reason then investigates these possibilities. As a result, sometimes rejecting them, sometimes confirming them. This has always been the method of reason. It is a faculty bestowed upon human beings. First of all, it enables them to perceive objects. Then it helps them draw inferences and establish conclusions. Regarding reasoning, I had said, if it apprehends principle, then it will seek corollaries. If it apprehends particulars, it will seek principle. And regarding reason, I had said it follows three fundamental principles. If there is an effect, there must be a cause. If there is an action, there must be an actor. If certain properties appear in an action, they must also exist in the actor. This leads to necessary conclusions. The realm of possibilities, however, is limitless and is shaped by human imagination. This is the entire story of reason. I have explained it in my book Maqamat in a chapter titled Knowledge and Reasoning. Similarly, I have discussed how perception leads to knowledge under the title The Foundations of Knowledge. You can find the details there. The scientific method, on the other hand, is based on observation and experimentation to arrive at facts. Science always relies on either observation or experimentation. Before this, science engages in the same process as reason. It explores possibilities of the imagination, formulates hypotheses from them, and then begins gathering evidence for those hypotheses. Sometimes the evidence conclusively supports a hypothesis. Other times it does not. At most, we can say that these evidences have made this hypothesis quite plausible. This is the method of science. And when does something become a reality in the world of science? When it becomes mine and your experience and observation. Hence, both these things are adopted to understand the world. This method of observation and experimentation is employed with the greatest strength when it concerns ourselves. The way intellect works, I have expressed it in a few words. As for religion, it is related to the guidance brought by the prophets. Intellect will guide you to certain conclusions. It will take you to the door and stand you there. Now you must either find the answer to these questions or not. I have explained this in one of my essays about when I observe the act of creation or when you observe it as well. Before me, the child of a human being is born. How it happens, we are all familiar with every stage of it. The act of creation demands that there is a creator, and in the way creation happens, there is the emergence of intention, knowledge, and power. Thus, some attributes of the Creator or the Creator's qualities also become known. Intellect will bring you to the point where you are standing now. Who is the Creator? Atheism says that it is this very universe, while the prophets, peace be upon them, present a concept of an existence beyond this universe, one with these attributes. When comparing these two, the intellect will accept whichever answer it is satisfied with. This, in my view, is a simple principle because the question of the Creator is an intellectual question, and intellect will bring you to the door of the Creator to the point where no one can deny it. Even atheism cannot say anything without accepting this initial stage. You can talk to the greatest atheist, and he will tell you the same thing. This very universe is the Creator. This very universe is the one whose totality, essentially, is behind all the phenomena. No other explanation can be given. I once expressed this in such a way that no one can deny the Creator. The only difference is that atheism believes the universe itself to be the Creator, while the prophets, peace be upon them, present a concept of an existence that is living and eternal, one who listens to my prayers, one with whom I will meet. These are the two answers. The one that feels more intellectually satisfying to someone, the one they feel at peace with, they may choose it. This is not a matter of debate. In my view, the opinion should be formed on the basis of reasoning. I am completely satisfied that the answer given by the prophets is intellectually satisfying. It also satisfies my nature. The source through which I received this answer, that is the Quran, is itself established as a divine book through such conclusive arguments that I don't feel the need to look anywhere else.
Now, Ghamdi Sahib, in what you said that from atheism's perspective, even if the universe is explained within itself, then they still have to accept the universe as God. But the issue, Ghamdi Sahib, here is that the intellect we have as a means of knowledge cannot comprehend or does not conceive the God described in religion, an aware, living, eternal, and omnipotent God with all his attributes. So, on what basis should we accept him? All right, there is a primary principle, but how do we accept that it is God?
It has never been claimed that intellect has discovered this God. This has never been said. It has simply been said that intellect brings you to this door and makes you stand there, telling you that the Creator exists. The Creator exists, and intellect cannot step back from this proposition. But who the Creator is, that answer is not given by intellect. This answer was given by the prophets. It is known through revelation. So, the debate is really about the authenticity of the revelation. The arguments for that are entirely different. This revelation is now found in God's book, the Quran. What are the arguments for this revelation? If you wish to see them, you may find them in my writings and in my essay under the heading Belief in God, where I have explained them in detail. That is a different world. No one has ever said that through the prophets or God, the God we learned about can be intellectually defined, that we can define and say, this is how we discovered him. At that point, intellect acknowledges its limitations and stands silent. In other words, when revelation is presented, intellect takes an intellectual review to see whether it is reasonable, understandable, and then it makes a judgment of acceptance or rejection. This is the same method we use in other sciences. We adopt the same method here. It was never said that we discovered this Creator through intellect. By the Creator, I mean the living and eternal being, whom we have not seen or discovered through intellect. We have never said that intellect demanded that we accept him in this specific way. What we always say is that the existence of the Creator is something intellect has arrived at. Now I must search for the Creator. There can only be two answers. Either the universe itself is the Creator, or the answer lies in the message of the prophets. I will evaluate both rationally, and after determining what seems reasonable, I will accept it.
Okay, Ghamidi Sahab say we accept that such a God exists who created all of this. Even if we grant that, we must also accept that the only way we know this is through revelation, for example, the Quran. Let's assume, for argument's sake, that its authenticity is beyond doubt, proven by all possible rational arguments and evidence. But how do we assess this report? That is, a man who claims prophethood conveyed all of this as a religious scholar, as a Muslim, or as a believer, you might say that your reason has accepted it or that you surrender to it. But what about someone who does not accept these things? For such a person, only reason is the criterion. He will say, through reason alone, such a God does not seem comprehensible.
Yet he will try to understand revelation through reason, and the Quran itself has provided rational arguments for its authenticity. It has set forth three distinct criteria on the basis of which you can judge whether this is the word of a human being or something beyond human capacity. Reason must first assess this report to determine whether it originates from a human source or a divine source. If it concludes that it is a human source, then the matter is settled. But if, after rationally analyzing these three arguments, it acknowledges that this is a matter of another realm, that this book is from a different world, then naturally it will believe in the truth of this report as well. Thus, the demand being made here is entirely mistaken. What religion asserts, listen to it carefully. I have observed the act of creation. This is an existential reality for me. Certain attributes manifest in this act. The structure of my consciousness compels me to believe that it has a creator. It must have a creator. Up to this point, reason has guided me. Now, I am presented with two claims. One claim states that the universe itself is the creator, and some evidence is offered in support of this. The other claim states that there exists a transcendent, self-sustaining being who is the creator. Where is this claim made? It is made in the Holy Quran. So I ask the Quran, how can I accept you as the book of God? It responds, examine me on these three grounds and observe how the Quran itself presents these criteria in a specific order. There is no need for me to add a single word to it. As for the claim of atheism, it must prove that the act of creation and the attributes manifested in it are inherent to the universe or to matter itself. That is, does matter possess will, knowledge, and power? If it does, then the atheistic view will also become worthy of consideration. But if none of these qualities are found there, then this view holds no weight at all. Now consider the Holy Quran. First, it tells us to examine its source or origin. Look at how it was revealed. Do you see any trace of human knowledge in it? That is, did the person who presented it at any point in his life, did he engage in scholarly study? Was he in the process of becoming a philosopher? Did he engage in intellectual exercises? Did he train in poetry under any mentor? In his 40 years of life, can you find even the slightest trace of trial and error? Yet, suddenly, one day, he stood up and spoke these words. In human history, you can scrutinize the greatest of scientists, philosophers, or sages. You will never find them speak even a few words without going through the process of trial and error and training and intellectual development. And yet this prophet declared, "This is God's revelation to me." Next, the Quran presents a second argument. When human discourse is produced, and when it comprehensively encompasses an entire life, whether that life belongs to a philosopher, a scientist, or a thinker, then look at their life's work as a whole. Can it ever be free from contradictions? Can it ever be completely flawless? Not a single example can be found. The Quran says, "Judge me by this standard." Now see how the Quran itself expresses these ideas. Regarding the first argument, it addresses its audience. Have you not seen? I have lived among you for a lifetime. Have you ever seen me practicing any such intellectual discourses? Have you ever seen me going through trial and error? Why do you not use your reason? For the second argument, it says, if it were from anyone other than God, you would find much inconsistency in it. It cannot be that a human effort is free from these errors. The third argument is this: every human work has a lifespan. Few things last even 100 years. Errors eventually surface. We know that in our time, the last great thinker was Allama Iqbal. Look at his reconstruction of religious thought. While it is not that his entire philosophy was proven wrong, there are many passages where scholars have identified errors, where his ideas have been influenced by his time, where his arguments no longer hold under modern scrutiny, but the Quran has been with us for 15 centuries. It says, "No falsehood can creep in from in front or behind it. It cannot be tainted by any falsehood, neither from the front nor from behind." So these three things he has placed as a standard and said that this is the word of God. This cannot be the word of any human being because these three things are inevitable for human speech. It first proves this to me intellectually, and then it gives me this revelation. Now, this revelation has become significant and trustworthy for me, so I will present it to myself in this way, and I will present it to others as well. This is its correct order, and this is how it should appear.
Ghamdi Sahab, the second thing you mentioned about contradictions. لو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا. Well, the issue of abrogation is present here, and it proves that there are contradictions as there is no reconciliation between two verses. The third point you raised is that when we read the Quran, it seems as if someone is speaking from a very small, limited region, whereas the discoveries of modern science, the human understanding, and everything he has observed, these are largely unknown to him. The cosmological verses, such as those mentioning the heavens or saying that the creation took 6 days, there are quite a few such things. Another thing is Ghamdi Sahib about the laws given to humans. There seems to be some bias. It appears as though a man has given these laws as women's rights are diminished, and in fact, women are even allowed to be beaten by husbands. Isn't this enough to prove that this is not from God? The God you first described, who is all knowing, all powerful, the ever living and sustainer, with all his attributes, this itself should be enough to prove that this is the speech of a human being.
You seem to have mixed two things together. Please excuse me for saying that. If you have any objections to the Quran, please state them, but one by one. The issue raised here is contradiction. You have misunderstood abrogation as contradiction. Abrogation is a gradual process. Whenever a command is given, it is the individuals who are addressed at the time. The Quran itself explains why it is saying something at that moment and why there is a change now. When I am speaking, I may give a command based on the circumstances before me. Then I will explain what has changed in those circumstances. Take each verse individually and you will see that the Quran itself explains it. For example, look at the punishment for adultery in Surah An-Nur. What are the words used there? Have some patience, for God will make a way out for them. This is what is being conveyed, that this is what is being said at this time. After that, we will see what needs to be said according to their circumstances. So there is no such abrogation in the Quran where God has stated one thing and then contradicted it with another ruling. The ruling is gradual, and a great lesson has been learned from it. We are told that in dealing with society, with politics, whenever you deal with something like this, it should go through a gradual process. In politics, social matters, and economics, no issue is presented in a way that causes great hardship for the people, nor should it become unbearable. Therefore, it always happens that a gradual process is followed. Where is the contradiction in this? If you can provide an example of contradiction, I will definitely consider it. As for the other things you mentioned, if you want to make them the topic right now, feel free to. Go ahead and tell me one by one what it is that the Quran has said. For example, when it mentions fi sitati ayyamin, that is, God created the world in 6 days, in another place it clarifies that you should not compare God's days to your days. The Quran itself clarified this. Now clearly, the matter of the days of God is under discussion. The days of God are being discussed here. We know that the days of our earth are different, the days of the moon are different, and the days of Mars are different. We now know this. So, when this universe did not exist yet, how could the days of the earth be under discussion? The Quran has itself clarified that the word yawm, day, is used according to God's perspective, not according to your perspective. This clarification has been made by the Quran itself. When the speaker clarifies their statement, there should be no need to repeat it. This should be taken as an invitation to proceed. So tell me, what is it that the Quran has said? When the Quran speaks, it addresses its audience. It is not a book of science. Its fundamental message is the call regarding the hereafter. From that perspective, it draws the attention of its audience to God's blessings, His mercy, and His signs. What are these signs in the heavens? What are these signs in calamities? Read the Quran in light of its own purpose and adopt the method I have just described. What does its Arabic language indicate? What is the structure of the sentence? What is the context of the verse? The Quran speaks from within its own philosophical framework and thematic system. It was not revealed to teach scientific knowledge. That is why it has never made scientific claims its subject matter. But think about this. It is a book of 600 to 650 pages with 114 surahs. From beginning to end, can you point to a single statement that you can say with certainty is false? At most, what happens? People have interpreted it incorrectly based on outdated ideas. When you examine more deeply, you find that the misinterpretation was imposed on the words, but the words themselves do not necessarily mean that. This is what you will experience every time. Tell me, is there any other book in the world that, throughout history, has had the ability to correct misinterpretations of itself if people mistakenly attributed outdated knowledge to it?
Okay, Ghamidi Sahab. So you are saying that, for example, regarding the cosmology of the Quran, we have understood this very clearly after reading your or Islahi Sahib's commentary that the Quran is not presenting scientific theories. Rather, it is guiding us to reflect on creation, on the heavens, and the realities of the soul. So even if we discover scientific findings in the future, must they always match the Quran? So even if the Quran mentions things about the physical world to explain God's oneness, His creativity and generosity, but is it possible that in the future there can be contradiction between Quran's statement and contemporary science? In other words, what is the relationship between reason and revelation? What is the connection between the Quran and science?
If you insert myths or stories beneath Quranic verses, there will certainly be contradictions. That story will create the contradiction. For example, if you interpret Khalaqa minha zawjaha, He created from it its pair, with the story of Eve being created from Adam's rib, instead of understanding it through the Quran's own linguistic patterns, then yes, contradictions will surely arise. But is that interpretation final and binding? The Quran has been preserved in its exact words so that you can always refer back to it. Now, since you are an intellectual person, tell me precisely, what has the Quran stated that has been definitively refuted by science? If even one such thing exists, we will certainly discuss it. But if nothing has yet been disproven, then have confidence in the future as well. Before interpreting the Quran, first understand its purpose with which the Quran is explaining something. It was never meant to teach science. Rather, it calls attention to the obvious realities of the universe, the inner world of humans, the outward world, the things that are self-evident, which people witness and experience, things that are not foreign to them. And through these, it directs them to God's power, mercy, and lordship. Let me ask you this. When a philosopher makes an argument, can you judge any of their statements without considering their intended purpose? Can you impose your own views on their work? The Quran presents matters from a particular perspective, so read it from that perspective first. Then tell me, what has the Quran stated that we now know to be false?
But Ghamidi Sahab, someone might argue, but miracles contradict science. For example, a staff turning into a serpent and swallowing all the other serpents. Similarly, parting the sea with a staff so an entire nation can pass through while their enemies are drowned. These are indeed extraordinary events.
But has the Quran ever claimed that these were scientific phenomena, the Quran states that these were acts of God. When you acknowledge the existence of God, you step outside the realm of science. You are now affirming a supreme creator, one who is all-powerful. This universe was created by him through his command that be. Your own existence is a result of his will. None of this is subject to scientific laws because science only studies the created order, not the actions of the creator. If you accept God, then accept his absolute power, and if you don't, then provide scientific explanations instead. What is the meaning of a miracle? Miracles, as described in the Quran, are divine signs, manifestations of God's power. The Quran presents these as acts of God, not as scientific occurrences. If the Quran had claimed that these were naturally recurring events, then it would have been making a scientific claim, but it does not. So why are you judging divine acts by the standards of science? Science's job is to study natural laws, not to pass judgments on God's actions. If scientists do not acknowledge God, and that is it, their choice. But they cannot judge divine acts scientifically. That itself would be an irrational approach.
So, Ghamidi Sahib, you are aware that there is an entire tradition of scientific interpretation of the Quran, and from Egypt, the Johari Tantawi Sahibs in the 25 volumes of Jewels of the Quran, something similar to which our esteemed Sir Syed Ahmed Khan also engaged in, and similarly other people. What was the issue with these people? What was troubling them that they chose this path? If the issue was so simple,
I have always considered such matters foolish. Even as a child, I never considered them worth discussing. In my opinion, anyone who reads the Quran, even once, who reads a single surah, can never be misled into such misunderstandings. The Quran is the speech of God. Who is God? What attributes does he have? It speaks of his power, his mercy, his blessings, and his news of the hereafter. This is the meaning of the Quran. Without understanding this context, how can one try to understand what a book is about? So this is something I never had an interest in, even as a child. The Quran, as it is, should be approached directly. I just mentioned that when we approach the Quran, we will look at it free from science, philosophy, theories, historical things, the Bible, or traditions. We will first understand what the words mean, what they signify according to the Arabic language. What is the construction of the sentence? What does Arabic recognize as standard interpretation? What is the context of the message? When you approach the Quran this way, it becomes very clear that such interpretations cannot be made.
and Ghamidi Sahab, those who interpreted the Quran in the light of philosophy or Kalam theology, you do not give them importance, you don't consider it appropriate.
I am not willing to accept any interpretation of the Quran through any light, be it from the Bible, traditions, jurisprudence, Kalam, philosophy, or science. The interpretation of the Quran is defined by the method of the Farahi school of thought. The primary principles of interpretation are threefold. The word will be understood as used by the Arabs in their customary manner. The sentence will be understood as it is constructed according to its traditional Arabic interpretation. And the word's usage will be defined in its specific and general context.
Ghamidi Sahab, it is usually said about the works of Islahi Sahib because he wrote the commentary on the whole Quran, and Imam Farahi's approach in his selection of exegesis, and even regarding your commentary Al-Bayan, there is an accusation against you that you do not refer to hadith for interpreting the Quran, but you derive the details of stories mentioned in the Quran from the Bible. So is it not correct to say that you interpret the Quran in the light of the Bible?
No, it is not in the light of the Bible. The Quran itself says that it is stating things in a summary form, and the details are available in other places. If it says, look into the hadith or history or the Bible, we will look towards them. This is not interpreting in the light of some other source. It's like saying, I mentioned something in my book, so you should look in the book to get the details. Here the Quran itself says, I am telling you this. If you need further details, go and see them elsewhere. When you read Surah Baqarah, we find that it keeps saying wa is and pointing toward the Bible. Of course, then we will have to turn to the Bible. What else can we turn to? Similarly, when we read Surah Ahzab, there it is talking about the Prophet's life and events regarding his family. Then, of course, we shall have to turn to the history only. What else can we turn to? So for us, the principle remains the same there also. When the context of the Quranic text itself is referring to some particular text, then we shall surely approach those texts.